Okay, apparently it's recording.
37 uniform, where do you park?
It's a uniform. Let's go to the transient space of the tower.
37 uniform, taxi via Alpha. You can remain this frequency.
Taxi Alpha, this frequency. Is this branded by any chance?
It is.
How's it going? Talk to you yesterday on Facebook.
All right, welcome back to Podcasting on a Plane. This is a view of aviation from both sides of the mic, to where I give you straight talk about the greatest thing ever, which of course is aviation. My name is Brandon Gonzalez, and welcome if this is your first time. I'm an air traffic controller at a busy general aviation airport, but I have extensive backgrounds in aviation as a pilot, as a flight instructor, as an aircraft salesman, ramper for a major airline, line service guy, and producer of aviation podcasts to the stars. Well, okay, maybe not that last one, but I do make a podcast, and it's this one that you're listening to right now. And it's my little way of serving the aviation community. So with any luck, you'll get something out of this podcast that'll help you in your aviation endeavors, whatever they may be, private, commercial, I don't judge. And if you're not getting something out of it that you wish you were, well, the request lines are open 24/7 at podcastingonaplane.com/contact. And while you're there, you can learn more about me, the guests we've had. You can listen to past episodes, record audio messages and feedback for the show. You can send an email and learn how to become a valued supporter. Oh, and hey, some fun news. By the time you're hearing this, you might be listening on Google Play. And if you are, welcome. You're the first. But if you're the kind of person that uses Google Play for all the fun content you can get there, well, we'll see you there. Oh, and also, before I forget, the remote ground training sessions, they're going great. If you're interested in doing some of your ground training with me for whatever certificate you're working on, I'd love to help you. You can just email me or DM me and we can set something up anytime you want. You know, last week I attended an aircraft expo at my home airport. These are so much fun. It's one of those traveling ones, you know, where they travel around all the busy, like BizJet airports like mine, Scottsdale, Arizona, airports like that. I actually went with one of my pilot friends that I'm mentoring, and he wanted some guidance about maybe moving up in aircraft a little bit. We'll see. But he had a great time checking out all the cool new planes, and I had an accidental meetup with a listener, and we'll call him Dr. Dan. He was there with his family checking out all the fun new offerings, and he recognized me. So we checked out some fun planes and, then I went to work. True story. Anyway, luckily we were able to email back and forth, and he said, among other things, first of all, it was a pleasure to meet you at the expo last Saturday. My kids, though shy, thought it was amazing to see a real-life ATC. And second, some feedback you requested. And we'll get to that in a bit. But before we move on, I had a couple of thoughts about some of the aircraft at the show. Well, two of them mostly, and they really stuck out for me. And the first one was the Honda Jet. Now, I realize these things have been flying for a couple years now, but I actually have never crawled inside one. And it was amazing. It was a little stark, but man, it was so clean, so well engineered, so well designed. Honda's really been on a roll lately with their cars. And to finally see, touch, feel, and smell the jet, it was really cool. And especially since the thing has been in development since I was in college, actually. Anyway, well done, Honda. I hope I get to fly one of these things someday. And the other one that left an impression on me was the new Mooney. Now, the aircraft is pretty much what you'd expect, modernized slightly in terms of creature comforts, but the thing that really gets your attention is the pilot's side door. Yeah, no, that's it. Seriously, there's a door on the left for the pilot. Okay, I'm a huge nerd. Moving on. All right, so let's talk about the industry. And the first bit of news that's kind of happened recently that I think we're all going to really care about is the FAA has dropped their complex aircraft requirement for a couple of the flight tests, the commercial and the CFI, to be particular. I'm going to read you an article from AOPA. This one's from April 25th by Dan Namowitz. It starts, the FAA has discontinued the requirement that applicants for a commercial pilot certificate with a single engine rating or a flight instructor certificate single engine rating provide a complex airplane for their practical tests. AOPA has long urged the FAA to drop the complex airplane requirement for the two practical tests and welcome the change. The requirement has often proved to be a costly and time-consuming impediment to advanced certification for many pilots. Eliminating the need to fly a complex airplane was a highlight of recommendations AOPA made in 2016 in formal comments on an FAA rulemaking proposal to ease the burden on pilots in training by incorporating new technologies and increasing the permitted uses of flight training devices. And for those of you that need the reminder, a complex airplane is defined by an airplane that has a retractable landing gear, flaps, and a controllable pitch propeller, which includes airplanes equipped with an engine control system, which consists of a digital computer and associated accessories, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, back to the article. In a notice of the policy update issued April 24th, the FAA acknowledged those concerns and said removing the requirement will significantly reduce costs for persons pursuing a commercial pilot or flight instructor certificate by allowing applicants to utilize less expensive airplanes on the practical test that are not complex or turbine powered. Training providers had also raised the issue of the scarcity of single-engine complex airplanes, the agency said, adding that, quote, complex airplanes that are available are older airplanes that are expensive to maintain, end quote. The FAA has received multiple petitions for exemption from the requirement. The petitions are additional examples of ongoing industry concern over the lack of flexibility provided by the current requirement to furnish a complex single-engine airplane for use during these tests for those certificates and ratings. The policy change, of course, it's worthy of note here, does not eliminate the complex airplane training and endorsement requirements of 6131E or existing aeronautical experience requirements. And here's the part, though, that's pretty interesting. The policy change comes shortly after an April 4th fatal accident in which a DPE age 61 and a private pilot age 25 who was taking a commercial pilot flight test died after the left wing separated from the 2007 Cherokee that they were flying shortly after takeoff from Daytona Beach International in Daytona, Florida. According to the NTSB report, the preliminary one, preliminary examination of the left wing spar revealed that more than 80% of the lower spar cap and portions of the forward and aft spar, the web doublers, exhibited fracture features consistent with metal fatigue. The aircraft, as we all know, was registered to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, which has stopped flying its Cherokees pending inspections, according to a news report. And that's the end of that article. Now, obviously, this was a very tragic accident that never should have happened. And it was from the news journal from Daytona Beach. And I'm going to read the article. It's from, a little while back, but just to give the background for what happened here. In Daytona Beach, the federal investigators are working to determine what caused a small airplane's wing to fall off midair, resulting in a crash that killed an Embry-Riddle University student and his instructor, an FAA pilot examiner. Witnesses, which included air traffic controllers, said that following takeoff, the plane's wing departed the aircraft, causing it to spin out of control and then slam into a cow field about half a mile from the Daytona airport on Wednesday morning. With the wing departure, we're focusing on our efforts initially on that part right now. Someone said in a news conference, we're looking at the engineering and any kind of maintenance records, end quote. Maintenance records for the plane, Piper PA-28R-201, which of course is an ERAU, have already been provided by the school, he said, but the student and the instructor were working on touch and goes. Determining what caused the plane's wing to fall off will take an investigation lasting between 18 months to 2 years, which is the typical length of time it takes for the NTSB to reach a conclusion about what caused a plane to crash. The investigation into the crash will include metallurgists examining the plane's wreckage, Mr. McCarter said. He said that a wing detaching from a plane midair is very uncommon and that there is no reason to think that there are any holistic problems, end quote, with the plane. A search of NTSB records examining crashes involving Piper planes found no mentions of a wing detaching. A 2015 FAA bulletin, however, warned that the plane's model has the, quote, potential for corrosion on the wing rear spar at the fuselage attach fitting, end quote. There were also two separate bulletins in 2011 that said that there was the potential for corrosion, quote, on the wing front spar at the fuselage attach fitting and on the aileron hinge fitting, end quote. All three bulletins say variables increasing the potential for corrosion include age, incompatible materials, and certain environmental conditions such as, quote, high moisture or salt water, end quote. The FAA makes clear on the website that special airworthiness information bulletins are an information tool that alerts, educates, and makes recommendations to the aviation community, and that they do not require mandatory actions. Later in the article, Jacqueline Carlton, a senior director of marketing and communication at Piper Aircraft, said that the company is working with the NTSB in its investigation, but cannot comment on the accident. Flight operations at Embry-Riddle resumed the Thursday after the accident for all the school's planes except the Piper ERAU, which was the one involved in the crash, said Ginger Pinholzer, assistant vice president for news and research communications at Embry-Riddle. And those planes will remain tied down until full inspections can be conducted, which will take at least a week. That's the end of the article. Now, as of this point, I'm not actually sure if Embry-Riddle's back to flying those or not. But while we're waiting, there's a really interesting couple of YouTube videos that are published, and they show a man named Roy Williams of Airframe Components in Indiana, and he goes over how to inspect a Piper plane's main wing spar and aft wing attachment fittings for corrosion. And both of them, of course, require that a hole actually be cut in the airplane's wing to allow for the insertion of a camera scope to see the wing's interior. Now, I think this is fascinating for a couple of reasons, but I'm going to leave a link to these YouTube videos in the show notes. Now, obviously, this isn't exactly hot off the press news, but I wanted to make a couple of comments on it. The Cherokee ERAU is like a workhorse of commercial training. I mean, rare is a civilian commercial pilot who doesn't have at least some time in one. But this accident kind of hit me personally, like right in the gut when I found out that it was a wing separation in an ERAU, because I actually came horrifically close to meeting a similar fate. Now, at a flight school I used to work for in another lifetime, we had just such an ERAU for those people working towards their commercials and their CFIs. It was an older one. It was, I think, a late 70s, but it was really well kept, and I really liked flying it. At the time, I was lucky enough to be a senior instructor, so I mostly did CFI students and multi-engine students, which is funny because that means I spent almost all of my time in the only two Pipers at a Cessna Pilot Center. But hey, I digress. Now, I flew that ERAU about twice a day with students working on their CFIs. And so, of course, we pre-flighted the heck out of that plane every day. But one day, it went in for its annual inspection, and the mechanic, who I knew flew it a lot too, well, he came into the office and got me. The ERAU was up on jack stands in the hangar. This was the only way you could have discovered the problem we found. He said, "Watch this." He grabbed the Hershey bar wing at the tip and sort of jerked it back and forth, and it moved about an inch fore and aft at the tip. The whole wing was just straight up loose. I think it was the right wing, but it doesn't matter. Now, I'm not sure if this had anything to do with corrosion, because we're near the coast, or if it was more of a damage thing, because that plane just got a lot of hard takeoffs and landings. But the feelings that came over me were complex, pardon the pun. But other than the relief of having dodged fate, they were all bad. And I'm not going to lie, a few four-letter words left my mouth, along with a few other phrases I'm not particularly proud of and won't repeat here. The repairs took a long time, and I never did fly the thing again. I actually already moved on to another career, but the plane ultimately met its fate about a year later when a renter porpoised it off a runway and into a hangar in another state. Now, I'm not sure if there's a moral to this story, probably not, but if there's anyone out there with A&P experience with Cherokees that would be interested in coming on the show and talking about this, I would love to have you on here. And particularly if you know any of the similarities and differences between the Hershey bar wings of old and the semi-tapered type, like we have now, as it pertains to this issue. And again, just a tragic accident that never should have happened. And hopefully between these YouTube videos, which are getting a lot of traffic now about how to inspect these and just general knowledge of it, I'm really hoping that if there are any of these Cherokees that are corroded out there right now, that we do get to inspect them properly and hopefully either do the repairs or move on before it happens again. All right. Well, let's start talking about some aviation careers. I stay in touch with a lot of listeners of the show, and a name that you're probably going to recognize is Bryan Juarez. He's got a gig doing one of those really cool things we've all heard about, but not a lot of people really do. And that, of course, is aerial survey. And he's really happy doing it. He's racking up a ton of good time, and he's willing to tell you how you can do it too.
For the weekend, I'm down here in Oceanside visiting family and whatnot.
Oh, cool.
But I was based in Camarillo, and then we got that work done out in the east. So we're now, concentrating in the LA basin. So I'm flying in and out of Whiteman as right now, and then maybe within the next week, and then I'll be moving out more easterly towards San Bernardino and whatnot.
Well, that'll be cool. So you could be in Southern California for a while then, huh?
Yeah, basically, the way they do it here with us, it's like once you're off out of, they hire you and then you go through training. And then once you're done, they put you in the singles for like a couple months while just kind of just to prove yourself that you're able to do the job thoroughly and whatnot. And then once that's done, then they'll kind of just like move you to the twins. So, they'll put you in a 310 and then in the Aztec by yourself. And then as time goes on, and then you go on the Navajo, and then the Conquest is the highest thing, the highest performance aircraft we have. So you kind of just move up that ladder. But yeah, I'll be here for maybe for another maybe another month or two minimal. But the job is still will be here because we're basically mapping the whole entire state. So we just did San Diego, and then we're doing LA, and then San Francisco's next. So the project still goes on, but I don't think I'll be here for the whole entire deal.
Okay, I understand. Well, at least you get to spend some time back out here for a while.
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely did miss it. So it's definitely good to be back.
That's cool. So you fly the Navajo though, right? A little bit?
Yeah, I did a little training in the Navajo and the Conquest as well. Basically, all that training was more intel of doing the survey part of it, not just flying the plane. So it's the training, it's all in the twin. So because ultimately that's what you're gonna fly. So all the aerial survey training, it's done in the twin. So there are a couple opportunities to do the flights in the Navajo and the Conquest and the 310. So I got a little bit of everything, and man, it's like it's something else, and I do enjoy them. So yeah.
That's cool. Right on. So, when I think about aerial survey, I just keep thinking about you just sitting there flying back and forth and back and forth and back and forth over like an aerial grid pattern. Is that how it goes, really?
Yeah, it really is. Really depends on the project, but like the ones I'm currently working on here in Southern California, like these lines are not even half a mile apart. So you're really like flying back and forth these lines that could range from a mile long lines to 30 mile long lines, and each line's separated, but at least by half a mile here. The norm is usually about a mile and a half, so there's a little bit of leeway of progressing through the job or progressing, covering more area thoroughly, but it just depends on the specs that the client recommends or it wants. So, it varies. But yeah, in answer to the question, you go back and forth for a very long time. So, but yeah.
That's cool. All right. So, for anyone just joining us, we are here live with Bryan Juarez, and he's, of course, a friend of the podcast. You've heard his name before. And he has a cool job flying aerial survey. So when we sat down earlier, we tried to record something and it just didn't go well. So he's back for our second shot, and I think this one's going great. So Bryan, I want to hear about when you got this job. You had a minimal amount of time, no CFI, and then you managed to get yourself into a situation where you now have you're just racking up time like nobody's business, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I started this job maybe almost 3 months ago, back in February, and my time at the time was I think I had 445 total time, I think, and then multi time I had maybe about 11 hours. Right now, I'm about to break 600, and multi-time I have like 50 hours. So but to give that more of a perspective, I am on a very long project out here in Southern California where we have to do a lot of survey down here. So and since Southern California always offers the greatest weather we can always have in the country, so we're expected to fly every single day if the weather's nice. So each day I'm at least doing 8 hours of flight time of work. So, within the last month, I've accumulated 110 hours. So that's definitely a lot. But yeah, it's racking up a lot of time, and I'm really enjoying the job, and it's going very well.
Well, that's really cool. So if a job like this is relatively fun, you get to fly pretty decent airplanes and rack up time like that. Why doesn't everyone do this?
I don't think a lot of people really know the industry there is with survey. I really didn't know much about it until I got into the job, or at least applied for the job, and I started learning more about the industry and the company I'm working for. But I think generally that's the problem, is that a lot of people that are racking up time, or at least doing flight training and getting the ratings and hours, they all kind of just format to the default of, hey, I'm going to do my ratings and then I'm going to do CFI, and that's it. They might look for other jobs, and maybe potentially into 135 operations if they hire full time and whatnot, but they don't look maybe into survey, which is a great industry to get into. And I think that's what the problem is, that maybe don't many people don't get into it because they don't know about it. So but yeah.
All right. So let's talk about aerial survey then. Basically, I'm picturing you just flying back and forth and back and forth, just with some camera running all day long. Is that accurate?
That's pretty accurate. That's for the most part, it's that going flying back and forth. There is what we call the ferry time. So the ferry is basically the point from you depart the airport and you get on station to begin shooting pictures. It really depends of where you're flying out of, where your job is at. So, but once you're on station, you're shooting pictures. It's basically that's all it is. It's you're flying straight lines back and forth. Each line is different depending on the project, what the specs of the client wants. Like I was saying earlier, these lines could go literally from a mile long lines, and I've seen all the way to 100-mile long lines. And it's just back and forth. The camera's shooting. You do have someone else in the airplane with you who's taking care of the camera stuff. So they set up the camera, they make sure that it's working properly, so you don't have to worry about it. All you're really worrying about it as a pilot is flying the airplane and just concentrating on that, and the camera taken care of by someone else.
Man, how long does it take to load that into the GPS before you go?
Usually a while. We start up the engines, and then the operator has to do their stuff of loading up the GPS and all the job specs and everything that is relevant to the job that you're doing. So sometimes we fire up the engine and we're basically just sitting there, with the engines at idle, just sitting there for maybe 10-15 minutes while everything's loaded up. And then usually the ferry time that takes from the airport to on stations, it's enough time for the operator to get everything loaded up correctly. Loading up the lines on a system that we use on board the fly them, and then usually the end of the day is usually what's the most at least the most boring part for me, because it's not that I'm saying it's boring, but it's like we ferry back to the airport we're landing at, and then the operator has to download all the images that the camera got during that day or during that flight. And some of these images are, they're long files, and also a lot of images. It could be from 5,000, 6,000 images. So we do find ourselves a lot of the time just sitting, landing, parking on the ramp or parking at the FBO, where it's just sitting there at idle for another 20 to 25 minutes after parking there, with the engine running. And, it's just, I don't mind it, but, other people, especially the FBO line guys, who's just sitting there and they're just like looking at our us, like, what are they doing with the engine running for that long time? But yeah, it usually does take a while to load everything up.
And that's crazy. So, what kind of camera equipment are those guys using?
We have a variety of cameras on our fleet. We still use the old school film. It's just basically a camera that just shoots film, and it's like, and you get the photography just the same process as we used to back in the 90s with basically every camera that was in existence. And then we do have more of the state of the art cameras that we call the Ultra Cam, which is usually a camera that's developed by Microsoft. And there's different sensors for them. They're called the Ultra Cam Eagle, the Falcon. And each camera has different specs and resolutions that the camera generates pictures at. But mostly they're digital, and then we still use some old school film.
All right. Well, so you said an average flight can last up to 8 hours. I mean, what do you do during all that time? That seems incredibly boring, to be honest.
Most of the time, lately, what I've been finding myself, it's basically, once I'm on station and everything's good to go, and I don't anticipate any problems whatsoever. And usually, if the level of, because we're talking most of the time, we're talking to someone, we're talking to ATC, because we got to coordinate our job and whatnot with them. So once, if I find myself good to go, there's not a lot I would say a lot of radio calls going on the radio and everything's good. I usually just I hooked up my headset to my phone. I start listening to your podcast or any other podcast, music. Usually I start a conversation with my camera operator, and at the same time, I'm looking out for traffic, staying, aware of what's going on with the airspace, and what's going outside of the airplane, and going, also managing the airplane as well. You got to manage, because, your expectation is to be up there as much as you can, but at the same time, not, mitigating, risking the risk of safety. So as long as everything is safe, um, you're managing the aircraft correctly well, and you're managing the fuel and everything fine, then it keeps you pretty much busy. You're always doing something. So yeah.
Right on. So, I guess I have to ask, and feel free not to answer, but I mean, do you just like bring a bottle with you, or how does that work?
Um, you know, yeah, that many people do that. A lot of people do bring a bottle with them. I actually do, just in case. But I've never found myself personally the need to go to the bathroom. I'm usually good controlling myself or my needs to go to use a restroom or to pee. But other people have, other people do, and I do bring a bottle just in case. But like I said, I've never found myself in a way to the what you might call it to use the restroom.
Sure. All right. No, that's fine. Thanks for answering that. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Well, tell me about just like an average day. So you wake up in the morning, and what does a day look like to an average or to a aerial survey pilot?
Basically, a typical day is that if you're on the road on a project, and you have a pretty decent day. So if the weather's nice, good to go. There's no worries with that. So usually, you wake up at the hotel room, you're checking the weather. That's the first thing you do. Check the weather. Once after that, then you have to perform a sort of a pilot health check to the company. So we have used a software that is kind of a question kind of based. You answer questions about if you feel, basically kind of like following the I'm safe checklist. And then once you do the health check for the company, you submit that to them. And then you're basically just mapping out your job that you're going to do for that day. We have software that we use, on a computer. We can load up a map with airspace, and we can load up these lines in a airspace and make these, maps for ATC. And once the maps are generated and are made, and then we send them to ATC through email or fax, depending on the facility. And then we give them a call to kind of just to confirm of the reception of the map. And then most of the time, they usually have a lot of questions for us, like what altitude, what time you're gonna be here, and such and such. Once all that is done, then you head out to the airport, you pre-flight the airplane. Your camera operators doing the same kind of thing on their end, checking the camera and cleaning the lenses and whatnot. And then after that, you basically just go. You basically just take off and fly. Depending on the aircraft you're on, and depending on how long it can stay up in the air, you can stay up there for basically the rest of the day, or there's sometimes you have to come back and refuel at the FBO. You did that real quick. You do a little quick turn, you get back in the air, and then you work towards the end of the day. And usually for us, for survey pilots, we usually have a window each day to work from, and that's depending on the angle of the sun towards Earth. So just to get basically the consistent brightness off the ground. So we work off that window. So we're expected to be basically shooting pictures from the beginning of the time window till towards the end of the window, which is usually around 5 to 6 o'clock around this time of the day.
Okay. And then after that, you land the plane, you get all the photos downloaded, and then you pretty much just you're done. Go out to dinner and hang out, or is there any more work that you have to do?
No, basically that's usually there's some post flight there is, we usually just, park in the airplane and make sure it's all, button up to go for the night. And then on the pilot side is you just have to send a quick report of, the hops time of the aircraft and maintenance. And then the operator has to do, sends the report of the images and whatnot. And these images, basically, since we're out on the road and we're basically away from our home base, we don't have the ability of loading all the images to our computer software or to our lapses or whatever we have on the road. So we have them on hard drives, and then once all the images are saved into that huge hard drive that goes into the camera, basically, and then he takes charge of sending the hard drive to the client or even out to our headquarters office so they can do it for post processing and whatnot.
Oh, okay. So you say you're out on the road a lot. Tell me about that. I mean, obviously you're not based in one specific area, but it seems like if you go out on the road or you're doing a long project, you might be in one location for maybe a few weeks at a time.
Yeah, the once you're on the road, basically, our headquarters is in Philadelphia, out in the East Coast. And I came from Southern California. I was living and did my training out here, and I moved out there for this job. And basically, when I was out there, I did training and whatnot. But once you're out of training, you're good to go, basically, to do production. Then the expectation is that since we have a lot of jobs all over the country, the expectation you as a pilot is that you're just gonna basically just pack up a bag, get an airplane, and just go wherever you need to go. Depending on the size and the length of the project, it could be as little as a couple days, could be as 2 or 3 months at a time. So you're definitely away from home for a long time if at times. Right now, I'm at an extended project out here in Southern California. I'm away from my I should say my new home, Philly, for I'm projected to be away for 2 2 3 months at a time. Um, but like I said, when you're on the road, you're constantly working. You're obviously concentrating and flying a lot because you're trying to get the job done as quickly as possible. But it is very depending on weather and whatnot. So you do find yourself with a lot of down days. So if you do have a down day, it's basically you're free to go and just hang out and explore the area if it's a place you've never been. The company does a great job. They provide us with hotels and a rental car to have for the crew. And you also get per diem. You get a per diem allowance each day for expenses such for food and everything that you need to get while you're on the road.
Okay. So you kind of just lucked out that you're on an extended trip back to real home, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah, it's an extended vacation. So, which is right now I've been really enjoying a lot. So yeah.
Right on. Okay, so I'm just kind of assuming this, but correct me if I'm wrong here. Since you're doing photography, you really probably aren't doing a whole lot of IFR flying, are you?
No, no, it's all mostly VFR. And to do the job, basically, you have to do it in VFR conditions, and it has to be more than the typical VFR day for a typical, I would say, a private pilot, private pilot, because us as survey pilots were more concerned not only with the low level clouds we may get, but also with the high thin clouds that are up in the flight levels because when those clouds move in, those high cirrus clouds up high move in, then usually what happens is that they cast shadows basically on the ground. And that's usually a red flag for us because when we take photography, we take pictures. The client just wants to see a consistent color brightness on the ground, and we can't have an area that's just low and dim and brightness, and there's others is very bright. So we also work with that kind of weather, like super clear day weather, because of that given reason. But we do get some IFR time if we do have to ferry the aircraft from, after we're done working on this certain location, and if we have to relocate somewhere else, then we do get the chance, the opportunity to fly IFR or just be in the IFR system to keep the proficiency up. And the company does a great job as well of paying for your IFR proficiency. If it's been a long time since you've flown IFR, they will pay for you to have an IPC either with one of our in-house instructors, or if you're moving up to another aircraft later on through your time with us, then they'll usually send you to school for the particular aircraft, and they'll take care of your IPC right there. So you're always IFR current, and then we do have the opportunity to fly IFR if we do get the ferry opportunity to move the aircraft around.
Sure, I hear you. Now, I get asked this question. Well, maybe I don't get asked the question a lot, but I've heard the question come up, and I think I know the answer at least. But why is it that this type of work can't be done just by drones?
Basically, because drones don't have the ability to do the job as an airplane does. Our company, we do have drones, within our fleet, I should call it, but the type of job that we use, the drones are way much differently than airplanes. An airplane, you can really go as high as you need to get. And it's say the higher you go, you take a picture, it covers a larger amount of area. So, depending on the height, it's the coverage of area you have in the picture. Now, drones don't have the ability as of right now to go really that high. And when I mean high, I'm meaning like maybe 6,000 feet, if even up to the flight levels. We do have airplanes in our fleet that we go up to the low flight levels, like 20 to 21,000 feet to take pictures, because just it could be that the client just wants a picture of a whole large area, and the drones can't do that. Now, the advantage that we do have for drones that an airplane doesn't have, and probably will never have, is that there's times that a client comes to us and they want to see a photo, or they want to survey say like a bridge. So if they want to do an inspection on the bridge, then we can usually just have the drones go fly up close and check the bridge out. Or even skyscrapers, we can fly up to close to a building without posing a hazard and taking a picture side by side of a building. Even ultimately, you wouldn't be able to do that with a plane.
Sure. And is that a service that your company provides too? Like, can you also be a drone pilot in your company, or is that just something you guys don't deal with?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so like I said, we do have drones in our. We usually do have drones in our fleet in our company, and then if to operate them, if you know how to operate a drone and you're basically certified through the FAA to fly the drones, then you can get trained by our company that use our drones. And there are a couple few people that are pilots and other even camera operators that are trained in drones, so they usually just take care of the business of doing the drone jobs right now.
Interesting. Okay. Well, as you're talking, we said this when we started out, but I just keep thinking, why aren't more people doing this? This seems like a really cool job.
It really is, and like I said, and I think it really is, and maybe we can ask the people at the podcast what their input is of why they don't do it. But like I said, I generally do think it's mostly because people don't know the industry there's out there. And also, not only with that, is that a lot of people don't learn how to fly survey in flight schools. You don't learn survey in flight training and anything. You learn survey on the job, and you're learning more about the industry and whatnot. So I would say just really pure of lack of knowledge there's out there, and I'm definitely guilty of that, because when I was doing flight training, I definitely did not know. I knew about survey and working in line service, but I didn't really put too much attention to it towards more when I was getting the job and getting into this job into this business and really what it entails. And really, as a low time pilot, if you're willing to fly around the country, and if you have the ability of, like I said, move around and do this, then it's a great job for you, because you do rack up time, you do to get to travel a lot for the company, and it's a lot of rewards that you get out of doing this kind of job.
Okay. So I guess then that begs the question, once people realize this, probably maybe they listen to this podcast and they think, you know what, maybe I should do that. So the resumes start coming in, and companies start getting a little choosy. How how difficult is it to get a job doing something like this? I mean, does it take a lot of politicking, or were you able to kind of just walk right in?
It's kind of a little bit of both, and really, at least from my experience, I should say, it's a lot of it's the interview process to get into this job is a lot thorough and longer than a typical job, I would say. And certainly for me, I went through a lot of steps to get into this, and basically, it all started off with sending my resume into the company, and then within a couple of I would say like maybe about 4 weeks later, I heard back. So I got this random phone call from the HR department, and it was just a typical phone interview, HR, with questions like why are you interested in the job, why you want to do this and this and that. And then it kind of got a little interesting, because once all those questions were answered, she just basically started throwing at me basically like basic private pilot check ride oral questions like define this airspace, what is the VFR minimums for their class B or C or D, or define some of the terms for IFR. So it kind of felt like on a check ride in a way, because I was basically being hammered with questions, but just out of nowhere, and because they want to test your knowledge, without giving you the heads up of preparation. So, but to be honest, all those questions were very basic private pilot questions. If you have a very good, and then because they're checking for the basic foundation of your knowledge on the ground, and then once that's done, the next process of that was a phone call from the chief pilot, or we call the director of flight operations. And he did a great job of going. It was a very long phone interview with them. It was about a more than 2 hour phone call interview with them, and how that went is basically, he went very thoroughly about the company, and then how they operate in the business and your expectations as a pilot for them. And he just basically kind of test your knowledge, kind of the same way, started asking basic, private pilot check red questions and some IFR basic stuff. And then once that was done, because I did spend 2 hours kind of just like showing off and proving to him on the phone that I have the ability to fly an airplane safely. But for them, it's not just enough. So you have to kind of prove it up to them, and then they fly you out to Philly. They put you on a multi-engine twin aircraft, and you fly with the chief pilot, you fly with your potential future boss, and and they put you on the spot. You have to fly within class B airspace, and making sure that you have a good foundation of situational awareness and whatnot. So the kind of answer the question is just basically is you demonstrating to them that you have the ability to have good situation awareness, that you're basically current, because they don't want to hire a pilot who has the time but hasn't flown in a long period of a time. So they want to make sure that you're good and current, and not only with that, but you have a good foundation of situation awareness, and it's really proving that to them, to literally to the point of that, because it was through the phone, and it was actually on the physical flight that you go with them to do the what you say, the flight and the interview.
Do they know then, or are they okay with, I should say, the idea that you're probably building time to go somewhere else, or do they expect you to stick around for a while?
No, definitely not. With us, even early on through the interview process, they, the director of operations, does tell you like, hey, we are in an industry of we do this, we take pictures, but it is also an industry that is a stepping stone for a lot of pilots so you can move on to the airlines, and they're definitely okay with that, and they're supportive of that idea. They're supportive of the idea that you're coming into the company, and they're supportive of the idea that you're racking up the time, and then once you have the time, you're going to leave. And they're more than okay with that. And that's what they expect, basically. And I would say everyone in the company that sees you come through the door, they do have that expectation, and they do have the idea of you moving on, and they'll support you through it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to assume that the turnover would be pretty fast. I mean, at the amount of time that you're racking up in such a short period of time, is there an average amount of time that somebody stays doing this, or I mean, is it just a couple months?
It really depends on the person, and and whatever they have in plan for them. But I would say the average that I've seen so far, it's usually about a year, because not only because they get to rack up the time and they want to go, it's just that they rack up the time and then they just don't want to let go of doing survey. It's just like I said, it's such a rewarding job that a lot of the people that do rack up the time and they want to go to the airlines, they do eventually do move on to the airlines, but they still stick with this job even to the fullest, part time they can, to just to stay here, because they do enjoy the type of flying that we do get to do out here. So I would say usually about a year is the average. A lot of the times it's usually less than that, but I would say about a year.
Okay. Is there a way to do it part time? I mean, do people come back, or how
Yeah,
does that work?
yeah, for sure. If you want to do it part time, that's fine. Or even on your days off, that when you're not flying for the corporate or the airlines, if you do have a period of about amount of time, then usually just usually let our director of flight operations know, and they usually just put you on a very tight schedule of working certain days and whatnot. So and there's quite a few people that do that here with us. So and then usually people that are out who are living full time out in the East Coast and closer to the Philly office, because then they have the more flexibility of flying out of there and being back on time without being away from home for extended period of time.
Sure. Well, tell you what, speaking of being away from home, I really appreciate you taking the time to, some of your vacation time here to come tell everyone about that. That's really cool. I'll really appreciate it.
No, no worries. I really wanted to do this because I wanted to basically, give that knowledge out there to people that are doing flight training, and people that they're going through the hours and ratings, and if they're trying to find a way of getting a low time job, that it's not the CFI route, because a lot of people that I do know, they're going through that process, and they don't see themselves as a CFI and as an instructor, or they're just not interested in it, and there's other ways to do it, and that's why I wanted to be here and basically just explain that there is other ways, and survey is definitely one of them, and give that knowledge out there to people.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a thing. I mean, the whole CFI bit, I mean, for myself, I enjoy teaching. I actually enjoyed being a CFI. Now, eventually, yes, I mean, you give several thousand hours and, if I never do another power on stall on a 152, it'll be too soon. But being a teacher takes a certain kind of person, a certain kind of demeanor, a certain level of patience. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that. And but what options do they have? I mean, that's really the quickest, easiest way to go build up that time, unless you've got, say, a hookup into a corporate job or something like that. But yeah, when you told me about this, I thought this is really a cool way to build up time sort of on your own and not have to, be somebody's instructor that they know doesn't want to be an instructor, because that happens all the time in the industry and it's kind of a bummer.
Exactly. Yeah. And to kind of be honest with you, when I was going through flight training and I was going through, especially through my multi-engine commercial add-on, I did hit that roadblock because it was either debating of I become a CFI or I do something else. And really, I do enjoy the fact of teaching, and I do a lot of, I do have a lot of friends that are going through flight training, and I do help them a lot, and I enjoy doing that. And I really did not want to give that opportunity away by not being a CFI. Now, I do want to become a CFI in the near future if I get the time to do the training and whatnot. But like I said, I hit that roadblock because especially when I was going through this, the training, but but the interview process of this company was more of sitting down of, hey, like, what am I actually going to do full time, either flight instruct or do the survey job. And it was tough because both jobs seemed pretty rewarding to me, and it was a very tough choice. But I think I'm managing, I'm working it pretty well, and I've decided to go do both. So I'm doing survey, and then when I do have the free time, I'm gonna definitely knock out my training and for the CFI. And I'm gonna do that too. During my spare time.
All right. Well, you're probably gonna have a whole line of people wanting to fly with you after this interview.
Oh, definitely, yeah. But yeah.
Maybe. All right. Well, I'll tell you what, how can people get in touch with you if they want to maybe learn more?
Yeah, they can reach me through email. That's basically the best way. So my email address is Juarez, Juarez, B_06 at yahoo.com. And I'm pretty much open if you want to approach me with any questions or anything there is to this job or how to get into it. If you feel that you meet the requirements, and if I'm not sure if I said it, but the requirements are for our company is 350 total time with 20 multi time. So the multi time is kind of very situational on the person. But if you feel you meet the requirements and you're interested, you feel free to send me your resume. I'll forward it on to my director of flight operations. You can definitely begin the process. But I'm definitely open for any questions or anything you want to approach me with on. And it's, like I said, through email is the best way to do it.
I actually enjoyed being a CFI, but that aerial survey gig, that sounds pretty neat. And if you're not the kind of person that wants to be a teacher, yeah, I don't know, it might be perfect for you. He gave his contact info, but if you need me to put you guys in touch, just send me an email and we'll get you going. All right, now to a new fun part of the show, the best landing I ever made. Remember Dr. Dan from our accidental meetup at the beginning of the show? Well, he sent me his story. The best landing I ever made. It was on a dare of sorts. I was a student pilot at Provo, flying the Diamond DA-20. I had soloed a few days prior, but my instructor and I had gone up to do some air work, and then into the pattern. We had done 2 to 3 touch and goes already, but I was having trouble getting the, quote, glider with an engine down without forcing it, end quote. My instructor advises I slow my speed over the fence and dared me to make the smoothest landing I've ever made. I don't remember much, it was about 15 years ago, but I remember him looking up at me and saying, "Get it down on the ground." I just looked at him in confusion and said, "It is." No chirp, no bump, just riding the mains. It was amazing. As far as what I was taught about ATC, my instructor loved to, quote, torture guys with ATC. Provo at the time was uncontrolled, but it's only a few miles south of the Salt Lake Class Bravo. We transitioned the Bravo frequently and even made a few landings at Salt Lake City. We also went up to Ogden, which was the first time I went to a control tower. I think the only thing we didn't cover with ATC was flight following. Now, living in Southern California, I'm grateful for the, quote, torture my flight instructor put me through. Thanks for the great podcast and keep up the good work. Dr. Dan. Pretty cool. Thanks, Dan. And if you want to share your story, you can do that via the website, which of course is Podcasting on a Plane. You can go to the Contact tab, and while you're there, you'll find links to all of our social media, including Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. If you find value in the podcast and you want to support the show, you can check that out or go to patreon.com/podcastingonaplane, where you can see the future goals for the show and find out how you can become a valued supporter. And if money's tight, I get it, that's cool. Maybe just head over to iTunes and leave a positive review. It's free, and it'll go a long way to help me improve the show and to help others find the podcast. All right, well, that's all for now. Thanks again for listening. Your frequency change is approved till next time, and I'll port back on this frequency for the next episode. Good day. The Podcasting on a Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. My comments and those of my guests, the website's content, and any of the social media, etc. are not part of my official responsibility as a controller or an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are mine and those of my guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. There is no nexus between Podcasting on a Plane and the FAA. Also, while I am a CFI, I'm not your CFI. Nor am I your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie, and fun, but is in no way, shape, or form professional advice. It's not legal counsel, and it's definitely not flight instruction. If you are in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be.